Tanjiro's encounter with Giyu at the start of the Demon Slayer series is probably the best thing that could have happened to him. But what if someone else was deployed to the forest near the Kamado household that day? In today's video, we'll explore how the Demon Slayer storyline would change if Tanjiro met a different Hashira in episode 1. Think about it. Without Giyu, Tanjiro never meets Orokudaki and discovers that Nezuko can sleep for sustenance to avoid eating humans. But things get even darker when we consider what would happen if Tanjiro met the Wind Hashira Sanemi Shinazugawa. One thing we know about Sanemi's past is that one of his family members was turned into a demon as well. He had to fight his own mother with just a knife and incapacitate her until the sun came up to make sure that Genya would not be killed. But wouldn't this mean that he would be sympathetic to Tanjiro's situation? No, in fact it would be the exact opposite. Seeing Nezuko trying to eat Tanjiro while the boy yells at his sister to calm down would awaken all that trauma that Sanemi has been carrying over the years. We would then see the Wind Hashira swiftly dashing in and beheading Nezuko before Tanjiro even has time to plead with Sanemi. We also know that Sanemi isn't exactly the most reassuring character, meaning that when everything is said and done, he might not even bother calming Tanjiro down. Ultimately, the Wind Hashira would leave as swiftly as he came, and Tanjiro might continue living as an empty shell of his former self, without ever even joining the Demon Slayers. Okay, so that was a pretty depressing way to start off our theories. But let's see how things would change if Shinobu Kocho, the insect Hashira, found the siblings instead. Right off the bat, things are looking better for Nezuko, as Shinobu relies on poisons as opposed to beheading. This means that even if she rushes in for the kill, Nezuko would have a shot at surviving the poison after the first blow. We also know that Shinobu is likely to listen to Tanjiro, as she already let him explain himself when he protected Nezuko at Mount Naragumo. Similarly, at the Kamado siblings' trial at the Ubuyashiki mansion, Shinobu was one of the few Hashira that treated Tanjiro with kindness, even though she was in support of killing Nezuko. This means that Shinobu probably just knocks out Nezuko with a mild poison and leaves her fate up to Kagaya Ubuyashiki, who would allow the siblings to stay together. Following the decision, Tanjiro joined Shinobu at the Butterfly Estate, ready to start his Demon Slayer journey alongside Kanao Tsuiri. However, it would soon become clear that flower and insect breathing don't really suit Tanjiro, meaning that he would need to find a new mentor. As far as mentors go, there are few better than the strongest Hashira of the Taisho era. So next up, let's look at how the story would play out if Gyomei Himejima, the Stone Hashira, was the first respondent to the Kamado family disaster. Now, while Gyomei is extremely sympathetic, his tragic past has also made him one of the most distrustful demon slayers we see in the series. This means that even though Gyomei will hear Tanjiro out, he will not believe in Nezuko's potential for redemption. One swift blow from his Kisarigama is all it would take to end the newborn demon's life. Unlike Giyu, Tanjiro would not even be able to distract Gyomei for a second due to his immense strength and unshakable resolve. However, things go much better this time than the Sanemi encounter, as monk Gyomei is able to convince Tanjiro that allowing Nezuko to live would have put her through grievous mental suffering, and that she is now in a better place. Thanks to Gyomei's words, Tanjiro's anger and frustration are redirected toward the demons that killed his family, and Gyomei takes the young demon slayer under his wing to turn him into a ruthless yet empathetic swordsman. Gyomei's approach to this matter would be measured and reserved, but what if someone a bit more excitable was the first on the scene? I'm thinking of none other than the sound Hashira Tengen Uzui. Now, even though Tengen is fast and powerful, he's not as ruthlessly efficient as the likes of Sanemi or Gyomei, meaning that Nezuko won't be taken out instantly. But her survival is honestly a 50-50 here. It all depends on whether Tengen thinks that a demon-human sibling duo traveling together is flashy. If Tanjiro does manage to convince Tengen to let Nezuko live, the Sound Hashira might even take the siblings into his care and try to figure out Nezuko's abilities. Now, while Tengen is an amazing swordsman, it's unclear how good he would be as a mentor. His teaching methods would probably focus more on style than developing the fundamentals of being a demon slayer. And while this may help Nezuko develop her blood demon art a bit earlier, Tanjiro is going to need a new master pretty soon, because his enhanced sense of smell is completely at odds with the sound breathing style. There's only one other Hashira that could be as flashy and fun as Tengen. So let's take a look at how Tanjiro's fate would change if he met the flame Hashira, Kyojuro Rengoku, soon after Nezuko was turned into a demon. Now, you may have a good feeling about this, but remember that during the first Hashira meeting, Kyojuro was in favor of killing Nezuko. However, if Tanjiro pleads hard enough, I can imagine a scenario where Kyojuro doesn't kill Nezuko immediately. However, the Flame Hashira wouldn't let them off the hook without testing them either. Rengoku would probably test Nezuko's ability to resist human flesh, somewhat similar to what Sanemi tried the first time he met the Kamado siblings. If she passes the test, Kyojuro is the type of curious soul who would never let an opportunity like this pass by, and would actually train Tanjiro himself, while also trying to find a solution for Nezuko's condition. The Kyojuro-Tanjiro team-up is actually one of the best alternatives in this timeline, as flame breathing probably suits his fighting style much better than most others. But what if the first Hashira to arrive wasn't driven by passion or flashiness, but by an almost ethereal detachment? Let's examine what would happen if Muichiro Tokito, the Mist Hashira, was the one to discover the Kamado siblings. Given Muichiro's memory issues and his tendency to forget things quickly, his initial reaction to finding Nezuko attacking Tanjiro might be surprisingly calm. He wouldn't be driven by the same emotional intensity as other Hashira, which could work in the siblings' favor. However, this detachment is a double-edged sword. While Muichiro might not immediately rush to kill Nezuko, he also wouldn't be particularly invested in hearing Tanjiro's pleas. The most likely scenario is that Muichiro would dispatch Nezuko with cold efficiency. But the worst part is that he wouldn't even remember Tanjiro's cries or the tragedy of the situation by the next day. After eliminating Nezuko, Muichiro would probably offer Tanjiro a brief, almost casual invitation to join the Demon Slayer Corps, viewing the boy's grief as a potential motivation. But without the emotional connection that the other Hashira might provide, Tanjiro would be left to process his trauma largely alone. If Tanjiro did accept and train under Muichiro, the training would lack the personal touch that makes a great mentor. But it's more likely that the lack of connection leads to Tanjiro to give up on his Demon Slayer journey early on. Now, let's shift to a completely different energy. What if the most emotionally expressive Hashira was the first to arrive? I'm talking about Mitsuri Kanroji, the love Hashira. Mitsuri's reaction to finding the siblings would be pure emotional chaos. She'd likely burst into tears seeing the devastation of the Kamado household, and her heart would immediately go out to both Tanjiro and Nezuko. Unlike other Hashira, Mitsuri's first instinct wouldn't be to eliminate the demon, but to understand what happened. She'd be torn between her duty as a demon slayer and her overwhelming empathy for the siblings' tragic situation. This internal conflict would probably buy Tanjiro enough time to explain everything. Mitsuri's naturally trusting nature and her belief in the goodness of people would make her more receptive to the idea that Nezuko could be different. However, Mitsuri would also be terrified of making the wrong decision. She'd likely end up taking both siblings directly to Kaguya Ubuyashiki, or her mentor Kyojuro, unable to choose between heart and duty. If Nezuko were allowed to live, and Tanjiro began training under Mitsuri, he'd find himself learning love-breathing techniques. While Mitsuri is incredibly strong, her fighting style relies heavily on her unique flexibility and strength, which might not translate well to Tanjiro's more straightforward approach. Finally, let's explore what would happen if Obanai Iguro, the serpent Hashira, was the first to discover the Kamado siblings. Obanai's deep-seated hatred for demons, stemming from his traumatic childhood, would make him perhaps the most dangerous Hashira for the siblings to encounter. His past with the serpent demon has left him with an unshakable belief that all demons are irredeemably evil. Seeing Nezuko in her demonic state would trigger every traumatic memory Obanai carries. He wouldn't just kill her quickly, he'd likely make her suffer, viewing it as justice for all the pain demons have caused. Tanjiro's pleas would fall on deaf ears. Obanai would see the boy's attachment to his demon sister as a weakness, and possibly even a sign that Tanjiro himself is compromised. After eliminating Nezuko, Obanai would probably lecture Tanjiro about the true nature of demons, trying to educate him about why his sister deserved to die. This psychological cruelty would likely break Tanjiro's spirit completely. In this timeline, even if Tanjiro became a powerful demon slayer, he'd likely become as cold and unforgiving as his master, losing the very qualities that made him special in the original story. So which of these Hashira would you have preferred to see in episode 1? Leave your thoughts in the comments and subscribe so that you never miss another alternate Demon Slayer storyline.